Okay, so I'm going to do the slideshow now. So welcome to this sound therapy webinar, I'm covering here what's been called the sound of now. Now, this is actually a phrase that was given to me by Kathy Edgar, otherwise known as Mama Shaker, and I think it came about when she was listening to something that I was saying on a previous webinar, or I was circulating before in emails, or maybe it just came up somehow in her own work. But she kind of passed it on to me, and I thought, wow, this is a great title, and so let's use it. And so what we're going to cover on the sound of now, so clearly it's a bit of a play on The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, who was instrumental, I think, in a more recent kind of way of talking about how we need to enter into present moment awareness in order to, to have a good experience of ourselves, to understand the true nature of life, and in that there can be a real healing. So what I'm just going to cover a little bit here is, what do we mean by the sound of now in this context? And yes, it does build on what we talked about last time about stepping into present moment awareness, but this is a much further and deeper extension of that. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what I'm calling the 5 dimensions of integral sound therapy. So what we mean by integral will become clearer when I talk about these 5 dimensions. So I'll come on to that in a minute. And we'll talk in more detail. We didn't get into the detail of this so much last time about the presencing or sound presencing, so I'll cover that in more depth. And I think it's going to be of particular interest to a lot of people is diving more deeply into the what we mean by the sacred sound current and how this all relates back into our work as sound healers and sound therapists. And there'll be some exercises for you to practice, not necessarily straight away, although you can on this webinar, but certainly these are exercises you can practice afterwards, or any time following. And there'll be some next steps for you to take. Very good. So, what do we mean by the sound of now? What is the sound of now? So the sound of now is a transformational process of creating and being with outer and inner sounds. So this is significant. So we're talking here about the sounds, the so-called outer sounds that we can hear. So what we mean by that are the sounds that we can hear kind of in the normal process of listening through our ears. And so these are sounds that are either naturally coming in from our environment, or they could be the sounds that we play through our music system, or they could be the sounds that we're creating in the sound therapy work that we do for ourselves and or others. And so that's clearly what we mean by the outer sounds. And the inner sounds are the sounds that we can listen to and, in a way, kind of hear, because they do sound like sounds when we kind of go more inwards. And so we'll come into a whole kind of exploration of the inner sounds on this webinar, and look to see how we can relate this back into sound healing and sound therapy and our own personal journey. Because if we can engage in this sound of now, this transformational process of creating and being with outer and inner sounds, then we can enhance the effectiveness of the sound therapy work that we do. So there is real value in doing this in relation to the sound therapy work that we do. But also what's important is that we can also get personal benefits from this. This can lead us into transcendental realms, transpersonal realms. And in the unity experience that we can have, then we can experience a really deep sense of peace, calm, joy, bliss, and a sense of freedom. And these are states of being that we all kind of aspire to, and that come with this when the separation between different parts of ourselves and between us and others kind of drops away, and we step into the place of oneness. And by engaging in this process of the sound of now, in this transformational process, we can have this kind of experience. And so that's the promise of doing this. And so we'll explore how to do that and on this webinar. Okay, so if we just dive into that a bit more deeply, and we say, well, what is this sound of now? So there's actually, we can break it down into two interrelated processes and practices. So the first one is what I call sound presencing. And I think on the last webinar, I referred to this as being the presencing process, or the presence process. But since then, I think it was Janice over there in Canada pointed out to me that there's actually somebody already called something that's a bit different, but something called the presence process. And I didn't want to confuse it, so I think it's better to call this sound presencing. And we'll cover that in more depth just now. So that's one kind of process and practice. And the second aspect to the sound of now, remembering this is all about being very present in present moment awareness with the sounds, with the outer and inner sounds. The second part is about connecting with what's known as the sacred sound current. So we'll dive into both of these processes and practices in more depth, but they do kind of cross over. Although we're talking about them in quite a separate way here, they do cross over a lot, and indeed we can integrate them into a kind of a whole sound of now process. So that will become a bit more apparent as we go along. Very good. So there we go. Okay, so before we get on to that, I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about the work of Amit Goswami, who's a PhD, he's a physicist actually who's done a lot of work with quantum physics, and he was featured in the film What the Bleep Do We Know? Some of you may be seen that, and has written a book called The Quantum Doctor. So this is where he's applied his knowledge and understanding about quantum physics to what is known as integral medicine. And so it's all about his guide to health and healing. It's a great book actually, and I highly recommend it. And in that he talks about the 5 bodies of consciousness and the corresponding 5 levels of healing that he understands from his knowledge of quantum physics. And I think the starting point is that in quantum physics, as it relates to us as humans, or indeed everything, is that it's like everything, it's like consciousness is out of consciousness that everything emerges. There is just a one mind, a one consciousness out of which everything emerges, all the vibrations emerge. And so, but we can see that it emerges into different levels or in different bodies of consciousness. So at the first level, the one that we're most familiar with, is the physical body. And this is, and connected up to the physical body are the sensations that we experience. So these are all the sensations that we experience physically in our body. The sensations of hunger, you could connect it to that. Sensations of pain that there might be as well, for example. The next body is what he calls the vital, otherwise known as the etheric body. So this is the bioenergy sphere, or just the energetic body that is more subtle and connects into the physical through things like the chakras and the meridians, for example. But the way we experience directly the etheric and the vital body is through our feelings and emotions. So other people maybe refer to this as there being an emotional body as well, but in this view it's connected up to more the etheric body in this way. And then we have the mental body, which ties in with things to do with images, the way we form images in our mind, in our mental body, and the beliefs that we hold. And then we have what he calls the supramental, or above the mental, which is sort of beyond really the world of language directly and what we're constructing in our mind. And this is very much to do with processes to do with creativity and intuition. So it's having these flashes of insight or flashes of creativity that can emerge. And then the final so-called body here is the bliss body, which is otherwise known as being the unlimited ground of being. Now, the point about all of this is that if we imagine that this is like a nested holarchy of bodies, so that the fifth level, the bliss body, is kind of on the outside and the physical body is more on the inside, nested on the inside. And as you can see, it's kind of becoming, there's a kind of, the energy is becoming more dense as we go down through these different layers, these nested layers. And so eventually arriving at the physical body. Now, how does this relate then back into sound therapy or a more integral approach to sound therapy? So we can consider this as there being 5 dimensions of the sound therapy. So when we're talking about the physical body, for example, and the health and healing and the wellness that we want to create in the physical body, so this is the world of sensations ultimately, and so we can be creating the sound vibrations directly on the body surface by placing, say, a Tibetan bowl on the abdominal area, for example, or on the back. So we can be putting the sound, and therefore there can be a real feeling of sensation coming in. And of course, sensations are also caused by the sound vibrations coming in through the ears, and then through the process of being picked up by the tiny hairs in the cochlea, and then the triggering of the electric current up into the brain, and then through the brain out into the nervous system and the connective tissues. There can be an effect in terms of the sensations on the physical body through the sound vibrations. Now, there's nothing new in any of this. This is the sort of thing that we've been exploring a lot on this course already, but it's just important just to make that clear. So we can definitely work directly on the physical body. Now, of course, we can be working very much on the so-called vital or etheric body as well. And through that, there can be often a strong release of feelings and emotions. Some of these have been around for a long time, maybe since childhood, maybe been suppressed or oppressed or repressed, and these can come up. So we can, for example, just as an example, work with creating intervals with, say, tuning forks or crystal singing bowls to release stuck and blocked energy in this vital or etheric energy body, and that will have that effect. So again, we can be working with this dimension of sound therapy. Now, when it comes to the mental body, so this is all to do with images and beliefs in our mental structure, then what we can do there is that we can be working with the subtle vibrations of intention and visualization to reform patterns of health and wellness. And of course, the understanding here is that the higher up or the further out we go, depending on how you see it in terms of these nested bodies, the more leverage there is in terms of creating the shifts in the health and wellness for somebody dealing with the health challenges that people experience. And we do need to actually engage in all of these different dimensions in order to bring about a much more deeper and longer lasting resolution of health challenges that people experience. And so sometimes we do need to bring about these changes at the mental level as well, with belief systems and images. But we can work with intention and visualization to bring about this kind of reforming that needs to take place. And we've talked about the formula of intention plus frequency equals healing. So that's where this comes in. Now, above that, in the so-called supramental body, which is the whole kind of world of creativity and intuition. So there we can work with certain forms of sound, such as shamanic drumming patterns, to be entraining our brain waves into this alpha theta zone while we're doing a kind of a presencing process, while we're really engaged in present moment awareness. And in doing that, this is the zone, the alpha theta zone. This is where we're most open to our creativity and intuition. So this can be very beneficial for us as we're working with sounds for the benefit of somebody else. So we can be getting in touch with our intuition to help guide the sound therapy process, and it can also stimulate our creativity so that we can work with the sound instruments and our voices in a more creative way. So that's a great thing. But also in this process, while we're doing this, our clients can also be entering into this kind of supramental body, and they can be opening up also to their own creativity and intuition. This can be coming through as well, so that they can get insights, for example, into the nature and causes of their own health challenges, for example, and what they need to do for themselves to facilitate their own self-healing as a result of that. So this is also very much part of it, and a very powerful part of it. And then finally, we get to the fifth dimension, the so-called bliss body, the unlimited ground of being. This is the being of pure potential. And so this is where the process of listening to the so-called inner sacred sounds comes in, because this is what it kind of enables us to connect and activate and to experience the bliss body. And so by its very nature is that when we do connect and when we do experience the bliss body, our own bliss body in this way, or we can activate this for our clients through this kind of sound of now process, then again, this is the field of unlimited potential. Okay, so this is where we know from quantum physics that at its root, at the subatomic level, they're actually, most of what's there is so-called space. It's actually highly charged energetically, but it's not particles, it's space. And therefore, what's happening in the physical body ultimately is influenced by the type of consciousness and the type of experience that we have in the nature of this bliss body. And so we can create fundamental shifts and transformations, and so-called miraculous healings can occur more easily if we can enter into this kind of consciousness, if we can bring our consciousness into this bliss body. So just remember that consciousness is behind and beneath and with everything, and it's in all of these. These are just expressions of consciousness, and it's the consciousness that creates the bridge between these different so-called bodies that we're talking about here. So hopefully that gives you some significance and some pointers to how we can be working with outer and inner sounds in these 5 dimensions of integral sound therapy. So let's move on then to the so-called presencing. So there is this wonderful quote from the Tao Te Ching saying, "Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The master does not seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting, she is present and can welcome all things." Yeah, I think it's a great quote because it's pointing to how, firstly, we need to cultivate this quality of patience. So this is not about being busy and rushing around and stirring things up too much. It's about having the patience to let the so-called mud settle, the mud in our being, in our minds, and with the busyness, to allow the water, the clear water, to emerge. And it's about cultivating the quality of stillness to remain unmoving until we kind of know the right action comes through us. And also what this is pointing to is how we need to kind of let go to a large extent of needing to be a seeker, needing to seek fulfillment, not expecting things to happen, not even expecting or seeking too vigorously, the process of enlightenment even, because it's the seeking itself that can create the busyness. And so therefore, what we need to do is enter into a process of not seeking and not expecting things, but just remaining present. And in that, there's a kind of an openness and a welcoming of all things to come in, and just being with whatever is arising. So that gives you a flavor of what we're meaning by the sound presencing process. So we're drawing here a lot on the work of Otto Scharmer and his colleagues at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who've developed a whole process called the U process. And this is something that I initially studied back in, I think about 2008, and have been working with quite a lot since then. And so it's a way of kind of letting go of the old, opening to the new, and then letting come the new, giving it some shape and trialing it out, and then grounding it in our everyday life. And it's also, we can work with sounds in a way to, and relating it to the chakras to enable us to open our will, open our heart, and open our minds in this whole process. So just to give you an example of how this process works, and this is a kind of an exercise that you could do outside of this. So the first aspect, because it's about working with the chakras, is you need to prepare the field by spinning the chakras. And in the last webinar, I gave you the exercise for how to spin the chakras. So this is, so you can refer back to the last webinar content for that. So you do that, you enter into a still space, you've got your, so this is a kind of a guided meditation sort of process in a way. So we're activating, we're spinning the chakras, we're getting them all balanced as a result of that, and all more energized. And then from there, we then need to bring into our mind and recognize the challenge. Maybe it's a health challenge or a life challenge or a work challenge that we're wishing to transform. So we need to face that. We bring it up into our minds to do that. And then we then need to enter into a process of getting into resonance with ourselves about that. So this is where we're bringing in this quality of loving kindness and compassion into our hearts, so that there's a process of acceptance and non-judgment about this challenge that we're facing and the way we are in this moment. But also there can be an energetic way to connect with ourselves and entering into resonance with ourselves. And I'll demonstrate that. I'll come back out and we'll do that with a video, and after I've done this little bit, and I'll demonstrate that, because someone was saying, I get what you're saying, but how do we actually do it? So I will demonstrate that in a minute. So anyway, so you enter into resonance, and then what often happens is that the things that block us from moving forward are these like inner voices of judgment, of criticism or fear often. There could be other things, that other kind of emotions or voices inside of us that can get in the way, but these are often the main ones. So these kind of hold us back from really letting go and being able to embrace the new. So we just need to recognize that there may be, or are, some of these voices around inside of us. So these are judgments about ourselves, these are criticisms, self-criticisms that we make, or maybe fear of the new, or even fear of success, whatever it might be, fear of change. We need to just recognize those. And then this is where we can also bring in the sound-related work. So for example, we could bring in, using our voices or an instrument like the tuning forks or the crystal singing bowls, for example, we can create more of a dissonant interval of a second. So for example, a C and the D notes. So this will encourage the release of those voices that are holding us back, these emotions that are holding us back, so we can let them go, and then we can surrender. So we might play the instruments or use our voice in this way for a few minutes to allow that to happen, so allowing these to be released. And then we can use a breath process, a balancing breath technique. Again, we covered that in the last webinar, so you can just refer back to that. So this allows us to enter into the stillness of the present moment, awareness. And that's where we can rest with this quality of patience to allow our will, our heart and mind to open up more fully into our intuition and creativity. Yeah, and so there again, we could be using, the intervals, or we could be using other sounds to bring in and encourage a greater quality of this intuition and creativity. So we could be using some drumming patterns, for example, there, repetitive drumming patterns at 3, 4, 5 beats per second would help with that as well. But if we do that, then we do need to allow for the stillness after we've been active with the sounds. So we do need to enter into the stillness there. And then in the stillness, we can ask our higher self the question, what am I called to do next? Why, what do I need to do? What am I being called to do next? Or how should I be? And then we can listen more to the outer and inner sounds in this present moment awareness, and we can receive some messages and images maybe about what we're being called to do next. It often comes up. And then from there, we can use the interval of a fourth, for example, a C and an F, and you can visualize yourself taking the first small steps towards this new calling. Okay, so this is part of the reforming process. This is part of bringing it into, grounding it into our life. And then we can use an interval of a fifth, such as a C and G, and we can be visualizing ourselves as we step more fully into the calling and as this becomes even more grounded. So there's a kind of a visualization process that can happen here, and we can be working with our voice and other instruments to facilitate that. So that's a kind of an example of the sound presencing process. That's extremely powerful, because what's happening here is that as we enter into this zone at the bottom, or the top of the U, this is where we're actually in the now, in the sound of now, we could say. This is when we're in patiently waiting in stillness, in present moment awareness, just being open to being, in a sense, guided by the future as it's emerging in the present. And so, and then through that, without any kind of sense of self-imposed direction, we can be truly open to a creative process whereby something new will emerge. And that's a wonderful thing. So how is this useful and beneficial? So what we can do then is we can use this in a variety of ways. Okay, so we can do this as a kind of personal daily practice. So we could be running through that process, that exercise on a daily basis, and just being open to seeing what's emerging. And if you do this at the beginning of the day, for example, then this could be a bit of guidance for what actually emerges in the day. And of course, it can guide your life and your transformational process in your life as well. You can also use it as a process to prepare for and guide, for example, a one-to-one sound therapy session. So it enables you to, by stepping into that present moment awareness with the sounds, to be open to receiving the kind of the messages and the images and the guidance to be more intuitive, to be more creative, and therefore to do what is going to be the most beneficial for our clients, to facilitate their own self-healing. So it enables you to prepare for and guide that. And similarly, you can use it to prepare for and guide a group sound session, okay, just in the same way. And then also we can use it to structure a transformational program. So something that is maybe designed, a whole process that maybe takes a number of weeks or months to take one or more people through a transformational journey. And so you can structure it in that way, using this sound presencing process as a framework. And that's what I'm going to be doing actually later this year. So I'll come on to that a bit more at the end of the session. Great. Okay. So let's move on then. So just to go through what we mean by the resonance exercise. So in this particular example, what we're doing is you need to get into initially a relaxed, grounded, centered, aligned state with some breathing exercises. Okay, so typically what we just recommend as a very simple exercise there is just taking in some long, slow, deep breaths into your abdominal area, and then so like in through your nose and out through your mouth. So I'll just demonstrate this in a minute. So what you then do is you then bring your attention on the the so-called witness area, which is this area in between your eyebrows, more like in the center of your head, but or just behind your eyebrows. So it's like your third eye essentially, and so it's where we're known to this kind of quality of witnessing in the present moment is activated by that. So we bring the attention there, and then also into the sensations in our hands. So we become aware of the sensations there, and you may want to rub your hands a little bit just to activate that and get that even more clear. So we become aware of the sensations in the hands. So we're focusing our attention then on the witness area in the hands. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move, we're going to have one hand that's a so-called energizing hand. So we're going to hold this just about between 10 and 15 centimeters on the thymus gland area above your heart, so like in the center of your chest, above the heart, moving that in and out until you feel where the feelings and sensations in your hand feel the most alive, so the most resonant in this sense. And then the other hand, so maybe you're using your left hand for that, the other hand is your sensing hand. And so you move this up and down slowly from your head to your waist, and you're then looking to see where the feelings and sensations are strongest in both hands. Okay, so let's just come back out of this. Hopefully it will work, and I can come back out, and then we'll stop that. You're back here again. Okay. So yeah, so let's just, you might want to follow me on this. So let's just do that. Okay, so the first thing then was just taking in some deep breaths, just to become more centered and grounded. That's good. And then you bring your attention to the witness area, into your hands. So I'm going to be rubbing my hands just to activate that. Okay, getting the attention. Okay, I can really feel that in the palms of my hands now. Got the attention here. So I'm now going to be placing one hand over my heart, just bring it out a little bit. So I'm going to place that there. And the other hand is going to be, since I'm doing this kind of scanning slowly down from the head to the waist. You can see it all exactly. So we're looking, so about there, that was where it was, the scanning hand would have the most feelings and sensations, and then just moving the other hand a bit in and out. Okay, just check to see if it's stronger anywhere else. It's pretty strong there as well. Okay, it's about there actually. Yeah, so that's where it's strongest now. So just hold it there. So that's the natural place of resonance in our energy field at this point in time. And then what I then do is to then activate just this feeling of unconditional love, loving kindness and compassion in my heart, by remembering a time in the past when I felt loved and supported and nourished by someone else. That's come even more alive now. So even more resonant. Yeah. So in that moment, in that present moment, there is this real quality of just being with how it really is in the moment, with that quality of loving kindness and compassion. So that somebody last time said, "Oh, I really wanted to know what that was all about. I couldn't quite get it." So I'm just going to go back to the show. Looks like there might be some technical problems going on. Saying maybe you need to refresh the browser to get things to work. So hopefully that's helping. Okay, so there we are. We're talking about the resonant exercises. So we just did that. Just need to get back into it again here. So this is playing up a bit as well. So we'll come back to sacred sound current in just a minute. I nearly finished the sound presencing. For some reason this isn't moving on now. So talk about technical hitches. What's going on here? Oh, here we go, it's coming back. Okay, right, next one. Yeah, so we're coming on to now talking about the inner sacred sounds. And I know that this is of real interest to a lot of people. So what we're doing here is we're talking about and recognizing that this is in itself is a valid, recognized and true spiritual path in many wisdom traditions. It's not very widely known, and it's not often talked about or even demonstrated. So it's a bit more hidden. It's been a bit more secret. But in the so-called Vedanta, even from the Upanishads, we know about a form of yoga called Nadi yoga, where there's references to the so-called anahata, or the soundless sound. And this kind of work is this kind of way of being with these inner sounds. The Nadi yoga has been more recently very brilliantly outlined and brought to our attention by Sri Brahmananda Sarasvati, otherwise known as Ramamurthy, or his original name was Ramamurthy Mishra. He's a medical doctor from India, came to the West and brought this knowledge with him. And I'll read you a section from his book later. He's got a little book called The Science, Psychology and Philosophy of Anahata and Nadi Yoga. And it's a brilliant little book. So we know that this is a long-standing tradition for many thousands of years coming out of Vedanta. And then emerging around about the 13th century after Christ, there was the Sant Mat group of teachers who taught the Surat Shabda yoga, which is a very similar sort of thing. And this has been described by a more recent member of the lineage, Kirpal Singh, who taught this in the West in many places. So we have that tradition as well. We also have the recognition that a very similar kind of practice was evident and was practiced by the Bon people in Tibet, and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who's now kind of mostly residing in the States, has, often teaches this kind of approach too, particularly on retreats that he leads. And then it's also actually in the Kagyu stream of Buddhism that was initially kind of instigated and taught by so-called Tilopa. And this is described by the 12th Kenton Tai Situpa, and is still an alive tradition there within Tibetan Buddhism as well. And then it's also something that Hazrat Inayat Khan, from the more recently in the Sufi tradition, he talks about the Saute Sarmad. And I wanted to read you a little section from this book actually it's by Frank Perry, called Himalayan Sound Revelations, because Frank Perry is one of a number of people who's more of like a modern kind of sound healer, sound therapist and teacher who's done a lot of work and is extremely knowledgeable about Himalayan singing bowls or Tibetan bowls. And so he's written this section about Hazrat Inayat Khan, who in one of his books said that abstract sound is called Saute Sarmand by the Sufis, and all space is filled with it. The vibrations of this sound are too fine to be either audible or visible to the material ears or eyes, since it is even difficult for the eyes to see the form and color of the ethereal vibrations on the external plane. It was the Saute Sarmad, the sound of the abstract plane, which Muhammad heard in the cave of Gahari Hira when he became lost in his divine ideal. The Quran refers to this sound in the words "be," and all became. Moses heard this very sound on Mount Sinai when in communion with God, and the same word was audible to Christ when absorbed in his heavenly Father in the wilderness. Shiva heard the same Anat Nada during his samadhi in the cave of the Himalayas. So he's basically pointing to the fact that this kind of inner sound, inner sacred sound, is known and is actually referenced to in most of the world's major spiritual teachings. So we have some more modern teachers. So Edward Salim Michael, Deborah Van Dyke, Frank Perry, Wayne Perry, Baird Hersey, and Dick DeRuta. So these are all people who have written, have taught, and continue to teach, some of them, how to work with these inner sacred sounds. And it's no coincidence, actually, that people like Wayne Perry and Baird Hersey have got a great and very accomplished overtone singers, because some of the sounds that we hear in the inner sounds are actually very similar to some of the overtones that we can create with our voices. So let's just move on from there and look at what do we, how do we work with these sacred inner sounds, and what are they? So if we just refer back to the Nada Yoga tradition, which is probably the one that is most widely known and heard about and understood. The thing about a lot of these teachers, though, particularly the more from the established traditions, is that there was this kind of secrecy around working in this way, working with the inner sounds. It is a very powerful thing. And so there was and has been a lot of secrecy about it. And there's this so a lot of these books that you read, for example, they tell you a lot about what the sounds are and how amazing this whole thing is, but they don't actually teach you how to do it. So you have to be kind of initiated into it. So they only teach it to the initiates when you've kind of been involved in the group or the circle for some time. And now it's been my experience that when I've been on some of these Buddhist retreats that I've done over the years, that I have had an experience and maybe, you could say a transmission into the inner sounds. So I've been very fortunate, but there are increasingly some of these more modern teachers are being able to talk more openly and write more openly about how to actually do this. And the book that or Baird Hearsley, his book about Nada Yoga, I found to be probably one of the most clear on this. And he talks about the 4 levels of sound in Nada Yoga. So he talks about the Vaikari, which is the sounds in the external world around us that we perceive through our ears. So that's pretty clear. So that's just the external sounds. He then talks about the Madhyama, which are the sounds of the mind. So these are sounds, so-called sounds that we can imagine or recall and hear in our minds. So there may be sounds that we've heard in the past that we can just kind of bring up. So it could just be a song or a piece of music that we've listened to, or we can remember what the sound of the river sounds like, and that sort of thing. So these are sounds in the mind in that sense. And then there's the next level up, so to speak, is the Pashyanti, which are sounds that kind of connect with colors and pictures. So some people, for example, when they listen to pieces of music or when they hear just sounds of nature, they get a kind of a visualization occurring. So they experience colors in their mind and or in different parts of their body even, and or they see pictures. So there's a kind of a connection there with the sound and light, you could say. So it's a kind of more of a visual process. And then the 4th level of sound is the so-called para level of sound, of going beyond, in a sense. So this is where where we're listening to the inner sacred sound stream. And this is what carries us into that bliss body, into this bliss state. Okay, so there's a kind of a correspondence here in some ways, what we're talking about earlier with the 5 bodies and the 5 dimensions of integral sound therapy. And so what there are now is there's actually a whole series of exercises that we can do that relate to each of these levels, and to kind of become progressively more attuned to being able to go into this para level, going beyond and listening to the inner sacred sound stream. Okay, so but I'm just going to focus here on this 4th level, on the para level, listening to the inner sacred sounds. So one of the things that we need to be aware of is that these inner sacred sounds, by listening to the sounds, they lead us to an inner divine light, to an experience of the inner divine light. So this is when we experience the kind of the quality of almost like going down a tunnel, perhaps, into the white light. And what we need to remember is that this, from the source of all, 2 subtle energies emerge. So we've got the light and sound emerging from the source. So we've got the yin and the yang emerging from the formless one. And so what this means is that we can connect back to the source through the inner sacred sounds and the inner divine light, through this sacred sound current, the sacred sound stream, that then activates the inner divine light and helps us to become aware of that. We can connect back to the source. And then when we connect to the source in this way, this is when we bring about the highest or deepest or broadest transformation and healing for ourselves and others. So this is why it's so powerful and useful and valuable to be doing this. And it's when we're able to do that, that's when we're able to be most effective in facilitating the self-healing of others through sound, and perhaps you can add in color therapy. Okay, so, because what we're doing here is we're working at the highest, the broadest, the deepest, the most profound level, the 5th dimension, working with the bliss body. Okay, just to remind you about that nested stream. So we're on the nested layers, the nested dimensions. We're on the outer layer here of the bliss body, which then influences and shapes all the other bodies right down to the physical. Okay, so there were, just to remind you, the 5 dimensions of this integral sound therapy approach: the physical, the vital etheric, the mental, the supramental, and the bliss body, okay? So this is where we're listening to the inner sacred sounds. So here's a simple inner sounds exercise. And you can do this just now if you want, but you can also do it later as well. And I do suggest you give it a go, because this is really profound stuff and is very, very helpful for your practice. So if you start, as usual, by sitting with a straight back. Now what you want to do now is you want to be blocking your ears with your fingers. So you can put in, yeah, of course, if you do this, you won't hear me. It's giving you the rest of the instructions, so it's probably best not to do this right now. But the idea is that you put your fingers in your ears, so you're blocking out the external sounds. This is what you do in this exercise. It's a kind of, you know, it's one of the early stage exercises in this process. And then what you can do is that you can bend forward a little bit, or if you're sitting on the floor, you can put your elbows on your knees, and with your fingers in your ears, you can cup your other fingers, so to speak, around your head. So you can be holding them at the temple and like underneath the ear on your cheekbones and that sort of thing. So you've got a nice balance, and you've got your ears blocked with your fingers. So what you can then do is you close your eyes and you just aim to sit comfortably in complete stillness. So you're just sitting still, and you've got your ears blocked, so you've blocked out the external sounds, and you're just kind of waiting and resting. In your heart, you activate this feeling of unconditional love that we've talked about before. And then, a bit like we were doing before with the resonant exercises, with your eyes closed, you kind of look up between your eyebrows, you know, into this place, kind of just behind, in the middle of your eyebrows, into this witnessing area. And basically, you just listen to any sound that emerges. Now, I remember the first time, and you just stay still. Now, I remember the first time that I did this, and I was quite amazed. I thought, what, you know, is it as simple as this? You know, what is, you know, is there going to be anything there? I was really surprised. So I put my fingers in my ears, and it was like, bang, suddenly I was aware of this kind of roaring sound. This kind of sound was a bit like the ocean waves, or it was a bit like thunder, and there was other sort of things going on as well, but it was quite a loud sound actually. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. There really are sounds in here. So we're talking here about sounds that are, of course, inner sounds, you could say, could relate to the sounds of your breath. But if you're hearing your breathing, then you probably want to be slowing it down and becoming more gentle with your breath. So you don't really want to be focusing on the sounds of your breath, or maybe you can hear the sound of your heart. You're aware of the blood pressure, the pressure in your blood going around, and so you're not really, or you can maybe hear the gurgling of, you know, your tummy and your digestive system. All of that is okay. Those are all, in a sense, inner sounds, but that's not really what we're listening for here. We're listening for other kinds of sounds and being open to that. And so what we just want to remember is that, so I thought I had a list of the sounds that we would hear here. So I just come back to that. Yeah, no, it's not, doesn't seem to be here. I'm just going to escape this for a minute and see if I can find that list, because it is actually quite useful to have that. No, it's not there. What I'll do is I'll just refer. So the kinds of sounds that you can listen to, or that you can hear, are sounds such as, like I just talked about, like sounds of the ocean, or sounds a bit like thunderclouds. And sometimes there's a kind of like a clicking sound that you get with that. It could be sounds of like a waterfall. Sometimes this could be quite a big waterfall. So these are more loud sounds, kind of like roaring sounds that can be there. And it often starts in this way with these loud sounds. And then what can emerge are things that are more subtle behind that. So there are sounds that can sound a bit like the chirping of crickets at night time. They could be sounds that start to emerge that are a bit similar to some of the kind of the musical instruments or that we know about, like the sound of gongs, or the sounds of different kinds of drums, or the sounds of church bells, or the sounds of a flute, or maybe the sounds of more stringed instruments like violins and so on. So, and what happens is that what you can do is that you can listen for the loud sound, the loudest sound that comes up, and then you just wait there and you pay attention and see if there can be a more subtle sound that's behind the loud sound. It's more subtle, maybe a higher pitched frequency or something that's behind it. And then you can be open to receiving that and to listening for that and hearing that. And then there could be a more subtle sound behind that as well. And then you can get drawn into that way. So you can increasingly get drawn into the more subtle sounds. And what happens then is that what you do is that even if you just start with the loud sound initially, what you want to do is you want to maybe just place your attention to your right ear initially, so you can hear it there most fully and completely. And then you have a sense of what you want to do is to be taking the sound from your right ear more down into the center of your head and into the center of your body, so that you just dissolve into the sound. And you just allow, so you're dissolving into the sound. And it's as though in this focused present moment awareness, you are the sound, and you're connected then with this inner sound that, in a sense, connects us back through the sacred sound stream back to the source. And so it's a practice that is immensely profound and powerful. And so what I wanted to do, just to finish off essentially, was to read you a section from this book by Sri Brahmananda Sarasvati, who I mentioned earlier, where he talks about the different types of places in our body, essentially, the granthis as they're called, these whirlpools of energy, a bit like the chakras that can be activated, and then associated with that, the different sounds that can emerge. So he says, when the first Brahma Granthi is pierced through pranayama, through breathing and meditation, like the kind of exercise we've been doing just now, the type of bliss is experienced in the inner space of the heart. And here the anahata nada, the soundless sounds, sound like Niagara Falls. This enormous current does not present any type of disturbance. Rather, one experiences a flood of pleasure and spiritual joy. The body becomes divine, healthy and glowing with spiritual light and life. The entire heart is free of inner pollution and commotion. In the second stage, inner and outer circulation melt into one. Yoga asanas or physical postures become firm and steady, and the restlessness of the mind subsides, unable to disturb it as it once did. The student becomes wise and godly, and then when this Vishnu Grantha is pierced, the practitioner experiences the highest joy and hears the rumbling nada or beating of the kettle drum. Subtle music currents wash over him or her. And in the third stage, the sounds becomes deeper and all pervasive, and the world of Maya or relative existence begins to fade away. Between the eyebrows at the Ajna chakra, the third eye chakra, one experiences a blue sky which vibrates with the sound of a spiritual drum. The light and sound emanating from the third eye begin to occupy the whole head and radiate through the entire body. In this state, ecstasy blossoms. the meditator experiences a state of spontaneous and automatic joy. There is the natural decline of evil, worry, and anxiety, as well as suffering and misery due to pain, old age, disease, and other burdens. Here the yogi experiences a state of natural calm, peace, and tranquility. When the Rudra Granthi is pierced and the prana enters the blue sky of the third eye, then the perfect sound, the sound of the cosmic flute, manifests. In this state, the mind and the inner sound unite. This union is called Raja Yoga. In this state, there is a natural union of the individual I am and the absolute I am, or the absolute self. By means of Yanada Yoga, the personal self is absorbed into the absolute Brahman, and one experiences the greatest happiness of life. So that's it. That's the promise of this practice. So I would say it's worth doing for so many reasons, for personal reasons, to help yourself and others. So remember in the last webinar, I referred to what I call the deep healing formula, where we need to, if we can bring in this combination of stillness, this unity experience, the love, the intention, the focus, concentration, visualization, frequency, and surrender, then that's what creates the deep healing, the so-called sometimes miracle cures, miracle healings. And this is really what we're talking about with the Sound of Now. We're talking about activating all of these different elements. And so we've talked about the 4 processes last time: the sound transformation crucible, the 6 steps to wellness process, the scalar energy process, and the sound presencing process. And so now we can add in the sacred sound current onto that. And remember that this is an additional and perhaps the highest path that we can work with when we come to working with sounds. So the next steps for you to take would be keep practicing these exercises for the sound present process. Practice the inner sounds exercise and write up your experiences in your sound journal. Keep it going. And you can, if you want, join our Sounds of Now program that we're running in the UK over 3 weekend workshops. It's a kind of presencing, Sound of Now presencing process and program. So if you want to get more details, send me an email about that and I'll let you know more about it. But it kind of takes on what we're doing here into the next levels. There will be lots more exercises, lots of practice, and lots of diving deeply into this in that Sounds of Now program. So great. So love what you do, make a difference, help others with healing sounds today. Wonderful. So I'm just going to come back now to the video. So I'm just going to catch up here now with some of the questions and comments people have been making. So hopefully that was useful and interesting to you there. And it looks like lots of comments about people saying hello, laptops keep closing. Oh dear, so lots of people not having great connections. There will be a link. You can use the same link that you've got. There will be an email coming out to you about this with a link to the replay, so you will get that. Some people it's cutting out, some people it's not, it looks like. It could be that there's a really strong activation of the field through this that is causing some problems. It sometimes happens. I actually do have a real problem with electrical appliances coming out on me when other people don't. So it does happen. And in fact, some other things happen as well that are pretty extraordinary sometimes. So Anne was saying, I find it difficult to describe the inner sounds that she hears. Yeah, right, okay. Well, maybe people want to share some of their own experiences with inner sounds, because I'm sure some more people have had these as well. So what is the name of Tricia? What is the name of the author of the 4 levels of sound? Yeah, this is Baird Hearsley. It's a book that's called. It was there mentioned in the slideshow. I'll just go back to that. He's written a book about Nada Yoga. So if I just screen share the slideshow again, hopefully that will work. Maybe it won't. Why isn't it? It's not working. Baird Hearsley. Yeah, I'll send it out. Maybe if I can just type it in here, you'll get it as well. He's actually yeah, I mean, he's been a yoga teacher, Ashtanga yoga teacher for many, many years, and he's also a very well-respected musician in the States, living, I think it's either New York State or Vermont, somewhere like that. And he writes and composes and produces music for films and TV and all that. But he's also been he does a lot of work with overtone singing, and he has formed his own chorus, his own choir of overtone singers. There's 9 singers in it called Prana, and they perform and do some recordings sometimes with Krishna Das, and so he's kind of really into all of this. And so he's I kind of really respect him and think it's a great source of wisdom, and particularly in relation to Nada Yoga. And he talks about how we can have other supporting techniques and exercises to support this. So, he kind of describes some asanas, some yoga positions and postures and movements that are very good, some pranayama breathing exercises that are very good and supportive, and so on. So it's a great resource. I'd highly recommend it. So that Betty was saying, when I lay on my pillow and have my other ear covered by the quilt, I can hear repetitive music, like a few bars repeating over and over. Is this the kind of sound I mean? Well, maybe. I mean, that's sort of, I don't know what kind of music it is you're listening to there, Betty. We're not really talking about these kind of soundworms that can get triggered by songs that we're familiar with, or maybe pieces of music that we know. We're really listening for, of course it can sound like music, but it's not really of this world, okay? So I don't know, Betty, if the kind of music, repetitive music we're talking about is more ethereal, or whether it's actually something that some music you know and remember. I'm not sure. If it's of the more ethereal type, it could be, but I think in my experience, it's almost as if these sounds are they're kind of more pure in a way. So it's not necessarily like a whole group of instruments all playing together, or a whole symphony orchestra or anything like that. There's typically sounds that are a bit like one of these instruments at a time, or a bit like just the ocean, or just the crickets, or just something like that. So yeah, that'd be more like it. Nora, my sound was like a deep wind breezing, and now still hear gentle sounds even though my ears are uncovered. Yeah, that's great. Sounds like you've been doing the practice. So that's right. So what can happen is that, yeah, as we can kind of, once we've heard the sounds in a way, and if we can keep focusing our attention on the sounds, then when we take our ears out, or you could do this with earplugs in as well, not just your fingers, but when we take them out, we can still be aware of these inner sounds. And the really advanced Nada Yoga practitioners, for example, they are consciously connecting to these inner sounds all the time in their waking life, in their dream life, when they're asleep, when they're awake, 24 hours a day, you could say. They're connecting to the inner sounds and the inner light. And so with the sacred sound current, they're connecting back to the source. So it's profound stuff. So lots more comments come flooding in. Great, so you got it. Tricia says got it. Great seminar, love the exercises and love that. Kathy, fantastic. Great, so let's see, that's really good. I'm wondering if there's any more comments or questions there. Here we go. Mary's saying, wonderful, Tony, thanks. I'm looking forward to this exercise. I heard what I hear occasionally without putting my fingers in my ears, like a car or truck running an engine. Yeah, like a deep rumble. That's great. I'm having some amazing results with sound therapy and feel that the action and intention exercise is extremely powerful. Brilliant, brilliant, Mary. Thank you. Love, light, and laughter to everyone, Mary. Sounds like great. That's really, thanks for sharing that. That's really good. If you've got any questions or comments or anything particularly you want to share, then now's good. Betty's saying, back again, I've missed so much of this. That's a shame, Betty. Yeah, I suppose the problem is that it does depend on having quite a good internet connection, maybe. That's what it's about. I don't know. So is this useful and interesting? Hopefully it is. Hopefully it is. I'd really encourage you to get into this if you haven't already started. You know, get into working with sounds of now, the presencing, the inner sounds, bringing it all together in that way. Yeah. So what I was meaning about cradling the head with the fingers and the ears, it's just like this, really. So just getting the roar in there, so that's good. I feel like the sound of the ocean. Yeah, some people also they kind of refer it. Sometimes they hear like a conch sound. There's all kinds of sounds that you can get like that. But yeah. So there we go. What's the time? Half past. It's been going for about an hour and a half. So it doesn't look like there's any more, particularly more comments or questions coming in at the moment. If there's nothing more, I'll just leave it there. So yeah, if you're interested, send me an email about the Sound and Now process that I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm coming out to Dublin for the next workshops there at the beginning of February. We're looking at working with Tibetan singing bowls and a bit of colour connected up with that as well. And then there's gongs. And then at the end of February, I'm back in Glastonbury again with a 4-day workshop called Love Vibrations, similar to the one we did in Dublin in October. So that would be also fascinating. Kathy is also supporting, Mama Shaker is also supporting in Dublin, Simone's also supporting, assisting in Dublin, Simone Meshnik, so that's great, we've got support there. Kathy's saying, I'm doing a sound session with Headway tomorrow for brain injury clients. Really looking forward to it, and she'll share how it goes. That's great, Kathy. That'd be really good. Katrina saying, great webinar, thank you. And big hug, Kathy. Love to know how it goes. Camilla, thank you, Tony. Need to finish for now. My computer seems to be buffering most of the time, so I'm getting bits of the webinar only. Is this available on the website and the slides too? Yeah, so there's a recording that you just click the same link basically in the email and you get this recording. It is being recorded right now, so the recording is available. So even if you missed through buffering or whatever, the recording of the webinar should be pretty good, and that is available. And if you want, I can make the slides available too. I'll put it all up on the website and send you a link about that as well. Camilla saying best sounds for everyone. So wonderful. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating, being active, listening in. So get into it, listen to the inner sounds and connect with the sacred sound current, and you'll see amazing results with your sound therapy and your personal healing, your spiritual journey, and we encourage you to do it. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for listening in. I wish you well. Good night. Oopsie. Got some more comments coming in. Great, people just saying thanks, enjoying the rest of the webinar. Great. Wonderful. Okay, everyone. Namaste. God bless. See you again soon.